I'm a local truck driver for a big-name grocery chain in my city. My route keeps me within about a 50-mile radius, just running pallets back and forth between the warehouse and a handful of stores. Nothing ever takes more than 2 hours, so I get to go home every night instead of sleeping in my cab at truck stops like the long-haul guys. That particular day had been completely ordinary, store to store, load to unload. My last delivery wrapped up around 9 at night. They took about 30 minutes to clear out the trailer, then I was free to head back to the warehouse and clock out. That last leg is always the longest, since the warehouse sits way out on the edge of the city pretty much by itself. About an hour into the drive, when I was maybe 15 minutes from the warehouse, my fuel gauge was flirting with empty, so I pulled into a gas station to top off. I pulled up to the diesel pump, started it running, and leaned against the truck while it filled. Across the lot by a parked pickup, a group of guys were standing around. They were the only other people there. They kept looking over at me and at my truck, not even pretending to be subtle. I figured they were waiting for me to leave so they could screw around without anyone watching. Once my tank was full, I hung up the pump and pulled out. As soon as I did, the group piled into their pickup and pulled out right behind me. At that point, it stopped being a little odd and landed firmly in what the hell territory. I couldn't guess exactly what they had in mind, but it was obvious they were up to no good and didn't care if I knew it. As we got farther from town, they started weaving behind me, drifting in and out of the lane and changing speed constantly. I grabbed my phone off the dash mount and called the police to report a possibly drunk, definitely reckless driver. In a loaded semi, I didn't feel personally vulnerable, but I was worried about anyone else who might come along. A couple minutes later, they swung into the lane beside me and sped up until they were even with my window. I looked down and saw a few guys staring up at me, saying something to each other. Then they shot ahead of me, cut into my lane, and slammed on the brakes. I had no choice but to brake hard too. I managed to stop just short of plowing into the back of their truck. The second we stopped, all 4 doors flew open. 4 guys spilled out and rushed up to both sides of my cab, yanking on the door handles trying to get in. I threw it into reverse and backed up fast, putting a little distance between us. Then I dropped it back into drive. My options were risk going off-road and possibly tipping the trailer or go straight through their pickup. I chose their pickup. All 4 of them scrambled off the road just before I hit. I smashed through their truck and kept going. Within 30 seconds, I was a good ways down the road. By the time I made it to the warehouse, police had already located the scene. They found the destroyed pickup on the shoulder, and all 4 of the guys standing there. As the officer later put it, they were very intoxicated and completely uncooperative, refusing to explain what they'd been doing. Whatever their plan was, having 4 drunk, aggressive men trying to force their way into my cab was terrifying. It all happened so fast that it might not sound like much on paper, but if I hadn't reacted immediately, it could have turned into something truly awful. There's no way to know how far they would have taken it. This next thing has been lodged in my head for about 10 years now. I swear every bit of it is true. It happened when I was in elementary school. Over summer vacation, our teacher gave us an unusual homework assignment. We had to go into the nearby mountains and write down our thoughts and impressions from being out in nature. So one afternoon, my mom, dad, and I decided to tackle a small local mountain trail. The path snaked from the base up to the summit in a kind of S-shape. The hike up was totally uneventful. We reached the top without any issues, and on the way I was already thinking about what I'd write. I knew my parents would help me shape it into something decent. After a while at the summit, my dad said, "All right, let's head home," and nobody protested. He'd promised to take us to a cafe afterward, and that sounded good. We started back down the same trail. Even though it was late afternoon, it was still pretty hot. As we walked, I suddenly realized something. We hadn't passed a single other person going up or down the entire time. What a lonely mountain, I thought. That struck me as a good observation for my homework, and I felt oddly proud of it. I turned to my parents and said, "Hey, this is a lonely mountain, isn't it?" Almost as soon as the words left my mouth, I saw a family coming toward us on the trail. I immediately felt stupid. So much for my big insight. The family looked like a mom, a dad, and a girl around my age. Our families were about to pass each other, but something about it felt off. They hadn't been on the trail. They stepped out of the bushes from the side. That didn't make any sense. The path was 7 or 8 meters wide with plenty of room, and the brush on either side was thick and unpleasant to push through. Why would they tromp through all that instead of just walking on the open trail? I called to my dad, who was a little ahead of my mom and me, and said something like, "Those people are weird." Then I looked more closely at them. Their faces were unnaturally pale. Something about them gave me a heavy, cold feeling. I moved closer to my dad without even thinking about it. They didn't look at us and they never spoke. If they were aware of us at all, they didn't show it. They crossed the trail in front of us, then pushed into the brush on the other side, heading straight toward the summit in a direct line through the forest, still never using the path. Their heads were bowed, and they moved in this strangely mechanical way, like they were walking without any real awareness. A little farther down, we passed an old man standing just off to the side of the trail. Unlike the family, he smiled and gave us a little nod as we went by. When we got back to the base, we went straight to the cafe for lunch. While we ate our sandwiches, my dad and I started talking about the strange family forcing their way through the bushes instead of using the trail. My mom, though, stayed quiet. I finally asked what she thought. Her answer shocked me. She said she had no idea what we were talking about. She hadn't seen any family at all. My dad and I looked at each other, both stunned. We figured maybe, since she'd been walking a bit behind us, she just hadn't been paying attention. Then I almost choked on my food when my dad suddenly said he hadn't seen the old man I'd mentioned either. He added quietly that to him, the family's movement hadn't looked like proper walking at all. It had seemed almost like they were gliding rather than climbing. I hadn't noticed that, but hearing him say it scared me badly. The fact that my mother had noticed neither the family nor the old man was just as unsettling. Did my dad and I see something paranormal that day? I honestly don't know, but if you'd seen their faces, their dead, pale faces, you'd remember them the way I do even now. It's been a decade and I still don't have an explanation. I'm hoping someone will read this and say, "Yeah, I've seen something like that," or "Something similar happened to me," because on my own, I doubt I'll ever know the truth. I wasn't really bullied growing up. I wasn't popular either. I was just there. The kid most people's eyes slid right past. If people said anything about me behind my back, I never heard it. I spent a lot of time alone, but I wasn't one of those kids who liked being alone. I'd try to join conversations, jump into ball games if they were short a player, anything to connect. It usually didn't work. I just wasn't good at making friends. That never stopped me from trying. One day after school, I was walking home. I lived outside town, close enough that they didn't bus me, far enough that it was a decent walk. I didn't mind. I'd done it my whole life and it gave me time to think. As I passed a field, I saw a group of high school kids I recognized heading off together. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to follow and see what they were up to. It sounds weird now, and it was weird even then, but I used to do things like that. Just sort of trail along behind people I knew, hoping maybe I could drift into their plans. They had a big head start, so it took a while to catch up. When I finally did, they were hanging out and smoking weed. They noticed me and, to my surprise, actually waved me over instead of telling me to beat it. They didn't seem worried I'd narc on them or anything. One of them even offered me the joint. I'd never tried it before, but I wanted them to like me, so I took a hit. Like a lot of people's first time, it was rough. They all laughed while I hacked up a lung for a good long while. After we'd been hanging out for a bit, me mostly listening, not saying much, one of the guys said he had a great idea. There was an old tunnel under a long closed road that he wanted to go check out. Supposedly it was creepy. I was all in. If they were going, I was going. We walked until we reached it. It wasn't a very long tunnel. You could see daylight at the other end. I'm sure you've seen the type. Just a concrete passage under an old dirt road. But it had a weird vibe. The road above was completely swallowed by overgrowth, bushes and trees everywhere. One of the boys pointed at something in the distance inside the tunnel. It looked like there was a body lying there at the far end. Once he said it, I saw it too. Unlike the others, though, I didn't feel curious. I felt sick. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't say that out loud. Instead, they started daring me to go check it out. I was terrified, but I also desperately wanted their approval. After enough goading, I agreed. The tunnel was dank and unpleasant, but not actually wet. It just felt wrong walking into that dim, echoing space knowing there might be a corpse ahead. I walked as slowly as I could, trying to drag out the time before I'd have to see it clearly. That probably sounds backward. Most people would hurry, but I was scared of what I'd find when I got close. As I approached, I could see the figure more clearly. It didn't look like it was breathing. That made my skin crawl, but at the same time, I kept thinking how impressed the guys would be if I got right up next to a dead body. I crept closer. Just as I reached it, a deafening metallic clang exploded through the tunnel, echoing everywhere. I spun around, trying to see what caused it. Before I could process anything, the body in front of me lurched and reached out. I stumbled backward and fell, staring as the man, because that's what it was, got to his feet. Behind me, I could hear the guys howling with laughter, but all my focus was on the figure now standing and shouting at me. I couldn't even make out what he was saying. I just knew he was furious, and I was absolutely terrified. I scrambled up and bolted for the entrance, running flat out. I have no idea what he yelled after me. I just wanted out. The others were already sprinting back the way we'd come, laughing. I followed them. At one point, I risked a glance over my shoulder, but I didn't see the man chasing us. Back at their usual hangout, they finally explained. The body was a homeless guy who'd lived in that tunnel for who knows how long. He hated anyone coming through there and would try to attack whoever did. The clanging I'd heard was one of the guys throwing a rock at the tunnel wall to startle him awake and scare me half to death. They thought it was hilarious. I didn't, but I forced a laugh anyway because I wanted to be part of the group. It worked. They seemed to accept me after that, and I wound up hanging out with them all through high school and beyond. Apparently, all it took to make friends was getting scared so badly I nearly my pants. I'm one of those people who completely freezes up when something truly unexpected happens. I found that out for sure a little while ago at a rundown department store. I was passing through a city and decided to stop in. From a distance, it didn't look so bad, but as I got closer, my opinion changed. It was small, obviously old, and looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. The place was crying out for renovation. I'd already pulled into the parking lot, so I figured I might as well go in and look around. It was a weekday and it was raining, so I assumed the store would be quiet and I'd be in and out. The men's section was on the 5th floor, so I headed straight there. Surprisingly, the selection was decent and I found a couple of good bargains. When I was done, I walked over to the elevator. There were 2 other people inside when I got in. In some fancier malls, you still see elevator attendants who ask which floor you want, in those neat uniforms. This place obviously wasn't one of them. I stepped in on the 5th floor, the 2 other passengers got off, and the doors closed with me alone in the car. The elevator started down. Between the 5th and 3rd floors, everything suddenly went dark. The hum of the motor and the faint electrical noise cut out completely. The elevator shuddered to a stop. Power outage. The realization left me cold. I was alone in a dead, probably decades-old elevator, suspended somewhere in a shaft. I swore loudly, very creatively in fact, and for once I was glad no one else was around to hear it. Once the initial burst of anger burned off, the fear really set in. I was trapped in a metal box in total darkness. I kept telling myself it would start moving again any second, but the longer nothing happened, the more anxious I got. What if the car suddenly dropped? What if the cable snapped? What if the doors opened onto nothing? Shouldn't there at least be emergency lights? That thought worried me even more. If even the backup lighting was out, this had to be a full-blown blackout. I silently cursed the store, its antique elevator, and myself for choosing this place in the first place. I wasn't in the dark long before it occurred to me to use my phone as a flashlight. As soon as I turned it on, the tiny circle of light made me feel slightly better. I stepped back against the rear wall, for no real reason other than instinct, and stared at my screen. Of course, I had no signal, no Wi-Fi either. In that old elevator, my phone was nothing more than a glorified flashlight. I finally looked up from it and glanced toward the doors. That's when I nearly had a heart attack. There was someone standing in front of me, a woman, small-framed with long hair hanging down, wearing a nice dress. Her back was to me. I was absolutely certain the elevator had been empty when it stopped, and there was no way anyone could have gotten in without me noticing. I froze, completely. It might have only been a couple of seconds, but in my head it stretched out forever. I didn't want to look at her, but I couldn't look away. I just kept praying, literally praying that I was hallucinating, that she wouldn't turn around, that if I stayed perfectly still and quiet, she might somehow not notice me. My brain started firing off random explanations. Maybe this was some twisted hidden camera show. Maybe the old building was full of asbestos or lead, and I was seeing things. In a moment of sheer, irrational panic, I did something that probably sounds insane. I locked my phone and put it in my pocket. I was more afraid of what the light might show me than of the dark. As my eyes adjusted, I could still see her outline clearly, standing with her back to me, facing the corner with the control panel. So I waited. I sweated. I struggled to control my breathing. I forced myself not to make a sound. Just when I had almost convinced myself she was a trick of my imagination, she moved. She stayed facing away from me but drifted slightly closer to the panel. Her feet made no noise on the floor. It was like watching a muted video. My hands started shaking. I thought I was about to scream. She lifted her arm and, from what I could tell, began pressing a button on the control panel over and over. Nothing happened. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft and horribly clear in the silence. "What floor did you fall from into the dark?" She started to turn. I saw the side of her face first, then her eyes, sunken, hollow, wrong. I was just about to completely lose it when the elevator lights snapped on. At the same instant, a calm voice crackled over the intercom. "To all our customers, we apologize for the inconvenience. We experienced a temporary power outage, but systems are now back to normal." I spun to look at the corner where the woman had been. No one was there. The doors slid open on the third floor, and I shot out of that elevator like a bullet. Later, I looked up the store online, trying to find anything. A news article, a local rumor, whatever. I didn't find much, but on Ashimoland, a Japanese site that marks properties where incidents have occurred, there was a little flame icon over that mall. The note said a young woman had been murdered there years ago, pushed into the elevator shaft. I've never gone back. To this day, I get anxious riding elevators alone. I don't think I'll ever forget her voice asking me what floor I'd fallen from into the dark, or the empty, ruined eyes I saw in that brief moment. I was 18 and had just moved to a new state for college. Classes were a few days away from starting, and I wanted to explore the area around campus while I had free time. The region was full of woods and hills with lots of hiking trails. One afternoon, I picked a trail online that sounded nice and drove out there. The description said it was about a 2-hour loop, so I didn't bring much, just a bit of water. There were no other cars at the trailhead, so I assumed I'd have the place to myself. Not too far in, though, I passed another hiker. He was sitting on a fallen tree off to the side, drenched in sweat and streaked with dirt like he'd been out there all day. He nodded as I walked past. I kept going for another half hour or so, listening to music and enjoying the quiet. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a man shouting behind me. I turned around and saw the same guy I'd passed earlier, waving his arms to get my attention. I stopped and waited while he jogged up. He said the name of the trail in a questioning tone, and I confirmed it. Then he pointed off to my right. There, almost blending into the forest, was another path, just a faint line of dirt through the trees, looking almost identical to the one I'd been walking. "Watch out," he said. "People get turned around out here and end up taking the wrong way." He seemed friendly enough, if a bit intense. I thanked him and followed the direction he indicated. He fell in behind me, still talking. He told me he'd lived in the area for years and walked this route almost every day. He said it always bothered him when inexperienced hikers got lost out there. At the time, that explanation made sense. I didn't have much choice but to keep the conversation going, since he was right on my heels. After a few minutes, though, the small talk faded, and we just walked in silence. We were still pretty much side by side. We just weren't saying anything. The trail ran straight for a long time. So long that eventually I checked my watch and realized we'd been walking for about 45 minutes since I'd turned off. Considering the whole loop was only supposed to be 2 hours, that felt wrong. By then, the trail should have started curving back. I was just starting to really think about that when I tripped over something hard. Looking down, I saw a rusty piece of railroad track half buried in the dirt. I followed its line with my eyes and realized that just off the trail was an old mine entrance. A small, dark hole gaped in the hillside, framed by 3 weathered wooden beams. The tracks I'd stumbled on led straight into it. I stepped closer and peered inside. The daylight only reached a few feet in. Beyond that, it was pure black. There was no way to tell how deep it went. As I stood there staring, the man walked up behind me. I turned to look at him. His expression was different now. The friendliness was gone. His face was blank, almost slack, and his eyes looked wrong. Hard to describe, but every instinct I had suddenly screamed at me. "Go in," he said. His voice was flat, completely monotone. It sounded nothing like the casual, chatty tone he'd been using before. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Every hair on my body stood on end. I took off running. He lunged, trying to grab me, but I dodged out of reach and sprinted down the path. Once I got a few yards away, I didn't hear him chasing me. After a moment, I risked looking back. He was gone. No footsteps, no movement in the trees, just the dark mouth of the mine waiting. I ran all the way back to the main trail, then all the way back to my car without stopping. I drove straight out of that forest and didn't look back. That was my first real experience outside my hometown. Not exactly the welcome I'd hoped for, but I learned something important. I'd trusted a total stranger just because he seemed helpful. If he'd managed to force me into that mine, I'm almost certain I never would have come back out. My name is Austin. I'm a 26-year-old man, and this happened about a month ago. My fiancée and I had just moved to Florida for better career opportunities, mostly for me. She gave up a lot for the move, so we decided to treat ourselves to a weekend at Universal Orlando Resort to unwind and have some fun. We planned everything carefully to keep costs down. Because the park tickets were so expensive, we went cheap on the hotel. Big mistake. We arrived the night before our park day. As soon as we pulled in, it was obvious why the place was so inexpensive. The sign said Quality Inn, but the building looked like some rundown motel that had been bought and rebranded without any real renovation. The room was bare bones. When I sat on the bed, the frame broke immediately. That was our first real indicator of the overall quality we were dealing with. We didn't spend much time in the room, though. We had plans to see a movie that night. We dropped our bags, left, and didn't get back until around 11 p.m. I was exhausted and had a pounding migraine. I changed into sleep clothes and lay down, hoping to pass out quickly. My fiancée did the same, and we both drifted off. Before I go on, here's the room layout. When you walk in, 2 beds are on the right with a nightstand between them. On the left, there's a table and a dresser with the TV. Straight ahead is the sink and bathroom area. Pretty standard. My fiancée always insists on facing the door when she sleeps. It makes her feel safer. She was curled up with her back against my chest. At some point in the night, she jolted awake. Her sudden movement woke me up too. She tapped my shoulder and whispered that she could hear someone outside the door, like they were trying to get in. I couldn't hear anything at first, but there was something in her voice that told me she wasn't imagining it. We sat there in the dark, listening. After what felt like forever, probably only 10 seconds, I finally heard it too. The faint, unmistakable sound of a key card being swiped and the handle being tested. Before I could even speak, the door swung inward. Thankfully, my fiancée had flipped the security latch before bed, so the door only opened a crack. Through that narrow gap, I could see an eye peering into our room. I jumped out of bed and yelled, "Wrong room, buddy." The man on the other side mumbled something I couldn't understand. He sounded drunk or high, or maybe he was speaking another language. Whatever he said, his next move needed no translation. He threw his full weight against the door. I shouted again, louder, trying to scare him off. I'm not huge, but I'm decently built for my size. It didn't matter. He was strong enough that I couldn't rely on brute force alone. After my second shout, he stopped for half a heartbeat. Then he stepped back and slammed his shoulder into the door, trying to break it open. My fiancée screamed and begged me to stop him somehow. From the glimpse I got through the gap, the guy looked solid, at least 61 and over 250 pounds. I knew if he got inside, it wouldn't go well for us. I grabbed our car keys from the table and laced them between my fingers. If he made it into that room, I was going to swing until I couldn't move my arms. I rushed the door and threw my whole body against it, knocking him back just long enough to get it fully closed again. He immediately charged it once more, slamming himself into it and shouting something incoherent. Beside the door was a window looking out on the parking lot. Through it, I finally got a full view of the man and of the people with him. He was exactly as big as I'd guessed. Standing a short distance behind him was a woman I assumed was his wife and 2 kids. I couldn't believe he was acting like this in front of his own children. My fiancée yelled that she was calling the police. As soon as she said that, he stopped. I watched him hurry back to his family, usher them into an SUV, and speed out of the lot. I told my fiancée to call the front desk and report what had just happened. No one picked up. After a minute, I decided to go down there myself. In the lobby, there was already a line. I waited nearly 20 minutes before I was second in line. That's when a woman stepped up to the counter and spoke. Her first sentence made my stomach drop. "Hey, we just used this key card to get into our room, but there were already people inside." It was the wife. I looked past her to the front doors and saw the same man standing by his SUV, clearly waiting for her. I stayed quiet and kept my eyes forward, not wanting to escalate anything. The clerk apologized to her and issued a different key. After they left, I stepped up and explained exactly what had happened, that their key had opened our room and her husband had nearly broken the door down. The woman at the desk admitted it was her mistake. She'd accidentally assigned them our room. What really pissed me off was how casually she said it, like it was a minor inconvenience rather than a situation that could have turned violent. I told her to make a note for the morning manager that I wanted to check out early and get a refund, and that we'd talk then. I was angrier than I let on, but it was late, and my fiancée didn't feel safe staying. Unfortunately, it was too late to realistically find another hotel that night. We pushed the dresser in front of the door, double-checked the latch, and did our best to sleep until morning. When we went to the front desk the next day, we expected the manager to already know the story. He didn't. In fact, he told us he'd asked the night clerk if anything unusual had happened, and she had said no. That sent my anger through the roof. To his credit, the manager apologized profusely, processed our refund, and checked us out early. I just wanted to get away from that place. Thankfully, the rest of the trip at the resort was great. but I keep thinking about how close that night came to going very differently. If my fiancé hadn't put that latch on, that man would have walked straight into our room with his family standing outside. I was fully prepared to attack him with those keys if he'd gotten in. Something truly horrible could have happened over what the hotel called a simple mistake. Always secure your door in hotels, and never assume a locked handle is enough. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and this happened in October of last year. The weather had turned colder, and it had been raining non-stop for several days. I didn't mind much. I work from home, so I barely had to go outside. That particular day, I started work early and was in the middle of a Zoom meeting later in the afternoon when everything abruptly went dark. The power in my house had cut out. I knew it wasn't just my computer because all the lights blinked off too, and the hum of the heater stopped. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and went to a window to check the neighbors' houses. Despite the storm, I could see their lights were still on. That worried me. If it wasn't a neighborhood outage, something was wrong with my place. I headed downstairs, got a proper flashlight, and went into the unfinished basement. I picked my way between stacks of storage boxes until I reached the electrical panel. The main breaker was flipped to off. I'm no electrician, but I knew that wasn't right. I switched it back on, and the house immediately whirred back to life. Lights, appliances, everything. I chalked it up to a possible short and closed the panel. Then I went back upstairs, waited for the Wi-Fi to reboot, rejoined my Zoom call, and finished out my workday. I stayed at my desk late preparing a presentation for the next morning and didn't finally shut my laptop until around 8 p.m. outside. The storm was still going strong. It was dark now, so each flash of lightning lit up the windows like camera flashes. I opened my office door to head downstairs. As soon as I stepped into the hallway, I heard faint, odd thumping sounds from below. At first, I assumed it was just the wind or something bumping against the outside of the house. I walked down the stairs. Right as I reached the bottom, the power cut out again. This time it startled me badly. I stood very still, listening. The house felt unnaturally quiet. Even the banging sounds I just heard had stopped. Only the rain and thunder outside broke the silence. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on, then went to the basement door. I opened it, descended the stairs, and immediately noticed how much louder the storm sounded down there. The wind and rain seemed to echo through some unseen opening. I swept the beam of light around the basement and began threading my way through the boxes toward the electrical panel again. That's when I saw it, a puddle of water on the floor. I frowned, but it didn't fully register at first. I stepped closer, moving the light around. There were more wet patches on the concrete, spread out beneath one of the small basement windows near the ceiling. My flashlight beam climbed the wall and landed on the window itself. It was wide open. Water was running down the wall and dripping onto the boxes stacked under it. And on top of those boxes, clearly visible in the dust, were muddy shoe prints, like someone had stepped up on them to climb in or out. My heart started pounding. I spun around, sweeping the light over every corner, every narrow gap between boxes, half expecting to see someone crouched there, watching me. I didn't wait to find out if anyone was actually hiding in the basement. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door, grabbed my keys and my phone, and ran out to my car. I locked myself inside and called the police. They arrived in about 10 minutes and went through the entire house, top to bottom. They didn't find anyone, but they did confirm that someone had broken in through that basement window. The screws had been carefully removed from the frame, and the pane was taken out. They replaced it as best they could from the inside to keep more water from pouring in. After I gave my statement, they basically told me to call again if I noticed anything else. There wasn't much more they could do. To this day, I have no idea who was in my house or what they wanted. The worst part is realizing that earlier in the day, when the power first went out, it was almost certainly them flipping the breaker while I was upstairs in a meeting, which means that, for who knows how long, someone was in my basement just a few feet away from me, hidden in the dark, and I never knew. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. If you have any feedback for me, you can leave it in the comments as well. If you'd like to send in a story of your own or contact me for any other reason, you can find links to my social media down in the description: Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter. Feel free to message me on any of those, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. If you submit a story, please include in the subject line the title, if it has one, what type of story it is, for example, true stalker story, paranormal, etc., and how you'd like to be credited in the video description. Add as much detail as you're comfortable sharing, and try to use your best grammar and spelling so your story has the highest chance of being featured. That's about all for now. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.